Good afternoon, everyone. I want to welcome you to today's program, Quiet Quitting, Not on Our Watch, Why Law School Should Still Matter to You, sponsored by the Young Lawyers section of the New York State Bar Association. During today's live webinar, we encourage participants to pose questions for the speakers using the Q&A tab in the Zoom portal. At this time, I'd like to turn over to today's speakers, David Jaffe from the American University Washington College of Law, and Jennifer Clayton, the Wellbeing Program Manager with the New York State Bar Association.
Thank you, Michaela, and thank you very much to those of you who are joining us today and those of you may be following up via recording. We know it's a busy time of the semester for you. Jennifer, you want to say hi as well?
Yes, hi everyone. Really grateful to be here, and yeah, excited to get started.
So a quick background for me. I am Dean of Students at American University Washington College of Law. I have been Dean of Students for a long time, since 1997, and also received my education from the school. So I've been working with students like you, I would say thousands of them over the last 25 plus years, close to 30 years now. And we were invited and we're thrilled to have an opportunity to spend some time with you, just talking with you, sharing with you some thoughts about concerns you may have, particularly at this time as first-year students, about your matriculation into law school, and potentially some doubts that you may have about continuing to school, whether the decision to start and continue at law school is the right one for you, right decision for you right now. So we kind of discussed this, and what I thought I would start with, it's a little bit of a nugget. I don't know if any of you from my law school will be watching this at some point in time, but I'm happy to give it away. I have occasion to have these conversations with students all the time. And at some point in the conversation, to me, kind of the point of inflection, an opportunity for us to figure out where the student is and what we can do, is that I'll ask them a simple question. And so I'm going to pose it to all of you. And the question, simply stated, is, do you want to be a lawyer? What I will usually do is that I'll pause, as I did here, and invite students to kind of reflect and think about it. And what I will tell you, and this is not scientifically proven, but I can tell you intuitively it has worked. Student who responds to me kind of immediately, yes, of course, and this is why I'm here, this is what I want to do, is typically somebody who really does want to be in law school. And then the question is figuring out what is getting in the way, what is preventing them from being happy, from feeling like they're being motivated and doing what it is they need to do. And we're going to talk some more about that during the session. The student, in contrast, for whom I give that same space and I see a couple of seconds, maybe longer of reflection, typically, and again, it's not 100% accurate, but typically what I learn is that that student probably did not start law school for the best of reasons. And what do I mean by that? I think the student who delays, it may be that they're simply not sure if they want to be a lawyer. I mean, that's certainly it. And we're going to have the same conversations with that student. But oftentimes what it means is they're really starting to let sink in for themselves that they came to law school maybe for not the best reason. And what I mean by that is that oftentimes what we find is that it's a student whose parents maybe compelled them in one way or the other. You know, you need to go to grad school and this is where we think you ought to go. And, you know, if you don't, we're kind of, you know, done supporting you financially. So you're going to have to get a job and figure it out. Or sometimes it's a student, I don't know what to do. And I feel like I should go to grad school. So I fall backwards into law school, but really not thinking it all the way through, and maybe not with some of the passion and the initiative that's really going to need it to be needed to get through school. So that conversation may be a little bit different. And in fact, I may, without judging the student, encourage them to consider completing a semester, depending on when we're having the conversation, and maybe take a leave of absence for a period of time and really figure out whether law school is right for them. For the bulk of students, however, I really believe if they've come to law school, the overwhelming majority want to be in school. And so the question becomes, what's getting in the way? What I know from meeting, at least with the series of counselors that we've had who work with exclusively with law students here, our counselors, of course, are you know, kind of stricken from being able to provide specific information about students without a release of information from the student, but they can provide general information. If there's something systemic, maybe that's going on at the school, or a thread that they may be hearing of some type, they can share that so we can see if we can strengthen what we're doing. What we know from over the years is that the overwhelming majority of students who present to our counselors, and we spend a lot of time encouraging our students to find the counselors when they're struggling, whatever the issue may be, or certainly if it's a non-academic issue. If it's academic, we have different offices and staff who can help them. What we hear from the counselors time and again is that the overwhelming majority of issues being prevented by students have very little to do with law school. What we're hearing, in fact, is that these are issues, we're going to put them under the general heading of trauma, but these are pre-law school issues that have just not been addressed. Family situations, sometimes family illnesses that may be lingering. It could be a parent, it could be a loved one. It could have been something tragic that had happened in the individual's life with a family member or with the student, with the student themselves. And you as a student, having gotten to law school, realize that this is really finishing school for you, right? Once you graduate, the 99+% of you are going to be going into the workforce, maybe a couple doing a PhD, but this is it. And so I think for a lot of you, this is like, I've got to figure this stuff out, or at least I realize atop what's going on in law school, that this is really slowing me down. Now, to be fair, there are what I like to call accelerants in law school, right? Law school is not, easy, skippy, happy-go-lucky for most students. You're looking at a new language, you're looking at a geographic move, oftentimes from where you were. You're concerned about the debt that you may be taking on and whether you're going to be able to find the employment. And you're also realizing that you're probably no longer the smartest student in the classroom, maybe not in the row that you're seated within the classroom. And that can be overwhelming. It doesn't mean you shouldn't be there. It simply means that there's some additional factors that maybe are adding to some of these other traumatic issues that have not really been brought to the fore. And all of these things oftentimes kind of stockpile, and it gives our students pause and sometimes concern for, should I be here? And that's really what we want to talk about with the balance of the time. So Jennifer and I had discussed this. And so one of the questions I wanted to put out to Jennifer kind of first was, what is it, Jennifer, from your position? What is it that prevents students from getting help, particularly when they realize or should realize that they need it?
I actually think you just did a really great job summarizing it. So when talking with students, you're saying that a lot of times it's these external factors that are having a significant impact on someone's overall well-being. So whether that be past trauma or just the world goes on with law school still happening pretty intensely. So I think a lot of it is really that self-awareness to understand when you start feeling a little off, when your normal healthy habits start slipping. So establishing a baseline for yourself. There's a lot of stigma, especially in the legal field, with asking for help. There's concerns that someone might not be able to call themselves a lawyer if they have a point in school or post-graduate that they're just feeling weak. I think the biggest thing is really highlighting that as a strength. So reaching out for support, like you said, David, being a lawyer is just one small part of what someone's gone through. And so thinking about the wellness wheel, so the dimensions of wellness, we think about occupational well-being. So that's going to be job satisfaction. There's also intellectual well-being. So thinking about continually growing, that professional development, challenging your cognitive development. There's various dimensions. So thinking about when you ask that question, do you want to be a lawyer? I would challenge people to think of that as just the start of the sentence. Your answer, yes, I want to be a lawyer. There doesn't have to be a period at the end. It can also be, yes, and I also want to be. And think about yourself as a whole person, because there's just so many other aspects that you need to be taken care of in order to succeed with your occupational wellness.
Right. Well said. I recall as we were kind of preparing for the session, we talked a little bit about imposter syndrome as well as a potential factor that may be getting in the way. And we could probably spend an hour on that alone, but could you touch on that briefly in terms of maybe even just a kind of a layperson's definition of what that might be and another matter that students may be kind of having to work through right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think imposter syndrome is so real, especially as aspiring lawyers. You're looking probably at some pretty well-known folks in the legal field, thinking about what they've accomplished and having your own personal goals. So also thinking about excuse me, I just totally lost my train of thought. But I think people worry that they're not going to be able to reach that goal because they have a lot of self-doubt. So when someone is focused on their whole self and feeling confident, feeling like they're healthy, feeling like they're taking care of themselves, they're also continuing to grow, continuing to learn, and really striving to meet career goals. So in order to combat imposter syndrome a little bit, where you have this self-doubt, maybe thinking, I don't have what it takes to be a lawyer. I don't know if I have what it takes to stand up in a courtroom. What I see on TV, what I envisioned as a child when I first said I want to be a lawyer, when you start having those moments of self-doubt, just thinking about everything you've accomplished, all the other parts of you, and remembering that every other person has those aspects to them as well. And that's what makes them human. And a lot of times those lawyers that we see on TV, we don't know what social supports they have. We don't know that they're regularly seeking therapy. We don't know that they're going to AA meetings, because those aren't things that are talked about, because we don't talk about them when we're in court and doing our job. So I think talking about those things too and making it normalized. It is okay to be building yourself up with these various levels of support, whatever that's going to look like for you.
Right. Well said. I think today's generation of students is doing a better job of being self-aware and willing to think about, if not talk about, these issues. And again, credit to those of you who are kind of attending this session, because I think it's something you're thinking about. And again, your generation is doing a better job than we did. And I think that's only going to improve. A couple of things came to mind in reflecting on your thoughts just now, Jennifer. We've done a session here at the law school in the past, and it's kind of it's a word bubble session. And I've said to my students time and again, if you could see the words that your classmates are forming in their head, if we could actually visually see these words over our classmates' heads while we were in class, we would be doing so much better. Because rather than thinking we're the only one who's struggling in class or doesn't get that answer, or feels for the moment that they don't know what's going on, and what they would actually see in their classmates' heads was, I'm so glad I wasn't called on, because I don't know what I would have done, or wow, that was a great answer. And yes, it's okay to aspire to a better answer, but we're probably roughly in an approximate, similar boat at the end of the day. And something else that had struck me, and I had mentioned off the top, that I know a lot of law students get concerned. There's oftentimes an early emphasis on kind of big law, because fall recruitment, or on-campus interviewing, OCI is known in many schools, is oftentimes the first employment face that is seen for rising 2Ls. Now, this is going beyond your first year, but a lot of you are thinking about this already. Oh, if my grades aren't good enough, I'm not going to get into big law, and now I'm a failure, and I'm not going to be able to pay my bills, or I'm not going to be able to find a job. And I'll just share very quickly, at orientation each year, and there's a longer version of this that I give, but the so-called punchline, and what I say to my students is, listen, I need to share with you right off the top, 90% of you are not going to graduate in the top 10% of your class. Right. And it's a little bit of math and it's a little bit of humor. But what I'm trying to say to the students is that our employment rate, certainly at our law school, and I think for any students attending, our employment rate is not 10% at graduation, right? It is significantly higher. So the point is that you don't have to be in the top 10% in order to find an opportunity, whether it's upon graduation. In some cases, it might take a couple of months afterwards. The employment will be there, and there are other factors. Again, it's an entire another session on finding the job of your dreams, but kind of getting over this mental hurdle of thinking you have to be in that top 10% or everything else is going to fall apart can kind of be just faulty thinking, and something that students need to work through.
That's a really good point. I also think about with that occupational well-being dimension of job satisfaction. And a lot of times, I think individuals find themselves in a job where they're not feeling fulfilled. And it might be because they took a job maybe for more financial reasons, or maybe it was the first thing that came along, but it's really not aligned with their personal values and morals. And that can be really challenging for someone to balance out their own mental, feelings around that, and really thinking about what direction they want to go with law. As a first-year law student, the opportunities are really endless, and
Right.
So thinking about what your ultimate goal is. What do you want to do with being a lawyer? A lot of people have these the why behind why they got into it. So thinking about your career path and how it aligns with that why.
Right, right. So we promised each other and the audience, so we talk a little bit about just kind of counseling itself. For many of our students, this may be, it may have kind of its own fear and its own issues. Some students have never been exposed to it before. We know culturally that sometimes there are cultures where issues that are personal are kept very close to the vest and should never be talking about it with anybody else. And again, this is something related to stigma that we're very much trying to break. I will submit that any one of us at any point in time is going to need counseling of some sort. And it's just a matter of when. You know, you get out of law school, you're going to be thinking about the profession, certainly, and how it may affect you. You can also be thinking about family if you choose to do that, and owning a home and all these other things. And the stressors will continue to be there. So Jennifer, if you would talk a little bit about, you know, what it's like to kind of approach counseling, what somebody might expect through counseling sessions, what that feeling might be like, so we can try to get students more comfortable in approaching it when they need to.
Yeah, I think honestly, I'm going to keep using TV references because I think that's how we learn a lot growing up. But I don't know, in all of my years in the mental health field, anyone that's had to lay down on a couch and talk about, you know, their childhood memories. So really getting any thoughts you have of what reaching out for help is going to look like, just erasing it, and then thinking about what you're looking to get out of it. If you're looking for some clarity, for someone to validate that you're not going crazy, that's exactly what's going to happen. Talking about the stressors, having a neutral person to just hear it. Sometimes our family members, our friends, they have biases. They might see us struggling and they might encourage us to quit. And that might not be the long-term goal. So just having someone neutral to just bounce ideas off of, get some of the dark stuff that happens, the thoughts that happen in our brain, they can get pretty dark sometimes, and it might be scary to admit that to someone, a colleague, a friend. It's not scary to tell a professional. They're expecting, they want to hear it all, because chances are you're not the only one that's thought that before. So it's really, I don't think it's as intimidating as one might portray it to be. And it's really more of a conversation to guide you, just to feel more in control and feel more satisfied with your life.
I've often heard it described it myself as somebody who's in essence holding up a mirror to what they're hearing you saying, and oftentimes parroting back. And sometimes the most common refrain from a well-established counselor might be, what I'm hearing you saying is, and trying to give that either sometimes literally back to the person, but sometimes kind of framing it from a professional counseling perspective. And oftentimes the student's like, wow, I actually didn't realize that, you know, that's what I was expressing, or that's what's coming out. Not that they're not hearing it, but they need to be hearing it back from somebody else to realize that what their emotions are, first of all, that they're valid, but also that this is kind of how they're manifesting. And then of course the opportunity to kind of say, okay, what do I do? What are the mechanisms that I can take away, or I can build towards, in terms of strength and resilience and things like that, so that I can work towards working through these or overcoming them, et cetera, et cetera.
Absolutely. And I think too, our brains are so complex, and they're really good at compartmentalizing. So if you're in school and you know that you have to graduate, you have to do well in classes, there are other aspects of your life that might slip. Maybe you're no longer as good of a friend as you once were to your high school peers. You know, there's various aspects that can start slipping. So really putting a focus on that care and getting that support.
Right. Great. And again, as a reminder, if any of you want to post questions to the Q&A, we'd be happy to take them. So a question we did not pre-discuss, Jennifer, but I think you'll be comfortable with. So I'm a student, I'm thinking about or looking to get counseling, and I have the sense there's several options. There's always kind of that private sector option if I have the money to do so, or my family is asking me to do it and they're covered, you know, under their insurance and all. But the more common ones are going to be finding counseling on a campus, either on the law school campus, or if you're affiliated with a main campus, maybe a main campus, and or in every state, almost every state in the country has this for students through a lawyer assistance program. And I'm wondering if you could just spend a minute or two kind of reflecting on if there are any distinctions between the two, or maybe just kind of elucidating a little bit on the lawyer assistance program. In some states, it's called an LCL, or Lawyers Concerned for Lawyers, but kind of what that entails, what that means.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like you said, there is a lot of resources out there. Something I'm learning in being relatively new to the New York State Bar Association within the well-being realm is there's a lot of conversations happening and a lot of ideas about what the best course of action is to really help lawyers succeed. I don't think there's a right or wrong path necessarily to reaching out for support. It's really what the student's feeling most comfortable with, maybe what the barriers are that have caused them to not reach out for help in the past. But like you said, there's often many, many resources within the schools, whether that's the dean of students, the counseling services, a trusted professor, academic advisor. There's so many ways. And maybe that person has their own boundaries and says, this isn't part of my role, but I'd like to get you connected. Everyone is there to support you. So if you're starting those conversations, just know that if you're talking to those people, they're going to get you connected to the right places. Now, from the Bar Association standpoint, with the lawyer assistance programs, those are great resources as well. There's some reasons why some students might not feel comfortable. Maybe they don't have a professor they felt really relates to them. Maybe they are concerned. Maybe their friends work at the counseling services. There's so many different barriers as to why someone might seek outside support from the schools. So that's where the lawyer assistance program comes in. For New York State, the students are able to join the Bar Association for free while they're students. And that is going to open up even more resources to them, including a 24-hour hotline for lawyers, aspiring lawyers, even their family members. So if they're needing some immediate support, maybe they're just starting to feel like their chest is feeling heavy, they're overwhelmed, maybe they've noticed they've been drinking a lot more than usual, and they're just noticing something's up, or they're feeling like they need immediate support, they can call that hotline and talk to someone who's experienced with working with attorneys and just really offer some immediate support. That support can continue and they can get connected to relevant practitioners that are that have worked with attorneys. It can also connect them to BetterHelp resources for remote online services as well. And that's all confidential. So if students are coming and accessing that hotline, that's not going on their record as, oh, when the student was using their free membership in 2022, they accessed the free services. There's no documentation like that happening. Really, these are just resources to help lawyers feel like they have support and feel like they have the control to get that support, whatever they need.
Yeah, well, I'm going to come back to that in a quick minute. So one of the, again, from a base level, to me, anybody who has spent the time invested in getting a licensure in counseling is worth their salt in a student meeting with. Now, you may, as you were saying a couple minutes ago, Jennifer, you may end up meeting with a counselor and not feel after a couple of sessions that you're connecting. And sometimes that's more difficult, quite frankly, in the university setting, because owing to resources and other things, the number of sessions oftentimes are limited. It's something that we're working on, particularly post-pandemic, when a lot of students are, looking for support around anxiety and related issues. But sometimes you kind of, you do, if I may, get kind of stuck the hand you're dealt with, but hopefully a positive person or somebody who's helping you in a positive way. Occasionally, and this will break down from university to university, if you don't have a counselor who's exclusively dedicated to law students, it doesn't mean you shouldn't be working with a counselor, but they will be coming at it from a more maybe general perspective. But again, as I said, near the top, typically the issues you're presenting with are not necessarily law school related. And so they're going to understand where you're coming from. Having said that, one of the distinctions, I'm kind of going back and forth, is that through the lawyer assistance programs, or the LCLs, are working exclusively with law students, judges, and lawyers who are experiencing issues around stress, anxiety, depression, substance use, whatever it may be. Oftentimes, those labs also work with significant others of those individuals, but their bread and butter with individuals in and related to the profession. So they may have some kind of nuances in a different components where if you feel like you need to tie it back into the law school and your experience related to law school, that might also be, relevant, if not helpful. The other thing I wanted to mention, and this is something I spend a lot of time on, I'll say for the final time, we could spend an hour talking about this, is that I know through some work that I've been able to do, that many students are reluctant to get help out of fear that they're going to have to report having gotten that help later on, i.e. when they're completing a character and fitness portion of the bar application, and that having to answer that in the affirmative could delay or deny their admission to the bar. And I just want to say real quickly, first and most important, well, two things most important. 1A, if you need help, get help. It's the most important thing you're ever going to do, almost regardless of how you think the outcome's going to be. Because if you're not in a good place yourself, in heart and body and mind, you're not going to be able to work your way through law school. Flat out. That's the simple kind of, mandate or insistence that I would give to you. You've got to get help if you're struggling. In every instance, if you're talking about situational counseling, right? This may be something that's short term. And again, most of the sessions they may be 6, they may be 8 sessions before you're either doing better enough to kind of get back on your own, or in, certain other cases, you may get referred out for additional assistance. But those counseling, in my view, and as most questions are asked in character and fitness, do not give rise to having to disclose that. Okay. If you get into questions where some states, and this is the area I've been working, because I believe questions around mental health should be entirely removed, as New York has done to their credit, should be entirely removed from character and fitness. But if you're applying in a state where they seem to be suggesting that there's a question, have you ever been diagnosed with, or something that relates to giving you pause, you certainly could have a conversation with the dean of students or somebody first in terms of, if I'm getting counseling for this, is it your sense I'm going to have to report this? Again, in almost every instance, the counseling you're getting is not going to have to be reported. But I would also say further, even if it's something that ultimately you feel needs to be reported, or in answering a certain question on character and fitness, it really seems like, yes, it has to be reported. We know anecdotally, not empirically yet, we're working on that, but anecdotally, that very, very few individuals get delayed or denied admission solely on acknowledging that they got help. In fact, the bigger issue around these issues is somebody who has not gotten help and then feels duty bound to report it on the character and fitness, and it potentially opens up the door for further inquiry in terms of, okay, you've reported this, what have you done around these issues? And basically, these barkeepers want to ensure that these future attorneys are well positioned to represent clients in their jurisdiction. So again, my mantra through and through is get help if you feel you need help. Rest of these issues are going to take care of themselves ultimately. Don't know if you want to add anything to that, Jennifer. But.
Yeah, I know we're running low on time, but I do really appreciate you bringing up the fact that it's hard to find a lawyer-specific resource when it comes to mental health counseling. Like you said, students are coming with this past trauma, various obstacles based on our demographic, with the thinking of, I'm doing this because I always picture the wellness wheel. It's a well-rounded, but thinking of what privileges, because of our demographics we grew up with, maybe financially we're set, but socially not so much. So thinking about accessing that support goes back to my first sentiment, that there's so much more beyond the identity of being a lawyer, that it's okay to be accessing a mental health provider that's going to be working with you as a whole person and not just your occupation, because there's a lot more that goes into it all.
Well said. So we are coming up on the half hour. We promised 30 minutes. We've not seen anything in the Q&A, which either means we've done a wonderful job, or students being students may be less inclined to pose a question. Michaela, Sierra, if you have a question or something you feel we might have missed, you're welcome to do so. I simply want to say to students who are picking this up, I trust your dean of students wherever you are. I encourage you, if you're having issues and you're not yet ready or inclined to go to counseling, go and see them. They're going to meet you without judgment, without having to report out. Certainly, let me say this, without having to report out short of an issue that suggests imminent harm to yourself or to somebody close to you. And so rely on them for that. And if for some reason you're not comfortable or can't find a dean of students, although the latter should not be the case, feel free to come find me. I don't care where you're matriculated as a law student. I was going to drop in the chat, but I don't think it'll show up for you. But my email address, you can find me at the Washington College of Law. My email address is the first initial and my last name. So djaffe@wcl.american.edu. I welcome your emails, your concerns, even your thoughts on how we can improve what we're trying to do at law schools around the country. And Jennifer, if you want to put in a plug for yourself or, the program with which you work, let's take advantage of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did have one final thought when talking about the fears of the confidentiality and things like that. It's also very okay to ask questions, speak in hypotheticals. So if you're feeling like maybe you've been excessively drinking. Maybe it started as a social thing and then now it's turned into an every night thing, and you're not sure how to get help. If you go to the dean of students, you could say, hypothetically, if a student was struggling with X, Y, and Z, what would be the next step? Or would that get documented anywhere? And if they say, oh yeah, that's going to go on your record and you're not going to become a lawyer, which would never happen, then you can say, okay, have a good day. I was just asking a hypothetical, but they might give you an answer that makes you feel comfortable sharing what you've been experiencing. If it was that first option, which again will not happen, that's where the confidential lawyer assistance programs come in.
Great point, and maybe a great point to end on. Michaela, you want to take us home?
Yes, thank you so much, David and Jennifer. And I just wanted to note that the Lawyer Assistance Program hotline number is 1-877-772-8835, or you can also call the Lawyer Assistance Program office at 518-487-5688, just so you have that information. And then for all the law students, for a complete list of upcoming events, resources, how to become a free law student member, and the member benefits for you to take advantage of while you're in your law school career, you can visit nisbet.org/law student. Thank you again, David and Jennifer, and thank you for the attendees for choosing New York State Bar Association programs.
Thank you.